Welcome back to the Follow Project. I'm Pastor Chris Solak. Once again, just another thank you to our community. For those of you who are new, who are joining us the first time, again, welcome. For our community, again, thank you so much for all your help with liking and subscribing to the channel. Your comments are always appreciated, helps us with the algorithm, and it definitely helps us spread the gospel across this platform. Of course, you guys can always go to thefollowproject.com to sign up for our newsletter, thefollowproject.com/books. We've just released our 30-day devotion for Ephesians, and then we also have a small group study guide that goes along with that as well, that has, if you want to take people through the corporate study, we have videos that go alongside with that. Our team has they've done an amazing job with that, and we're really proud of it. And I've gotten to take a group of men through it these last few weeks, and it's been very powerful. We've had a small group for almost 10 years now, and it's been really cool to see how we've covered Ephesians several times, and yet the way God has cultivated this, it's created a lot of new conversation. And of course, it's an important time for us to focus on what is the true body of Christ and the unity of the body of Christ truly look like in an end time situation. And that's where we're at. And the book of Ephesians gives us very strong guidance for that, as well as, of course, warfare, and then actually how to cultivate our families, develop our families, to raise them up spiritually as well. So love for you to check all of that out. Of course, all of our links are in the description below. So we are in Hebrews chapter 5. We have been talking about the order of Melchizedek, and you know, it's one of those things where focusing on the redemptive work of Christ, it gets a bit repetitive because we talk about it so much, yet there's a vastness to it, there's a completeness to it that I don't know if we'll ever truly be able to comprehend until we move into the next life. Yet we know that it is true by the evidence that it produces here within this fallen reality. In Hebrews 5:7 it says, "During Christ's days on earth, he pleaded with God, praying and petitioning with passion and with tearful agony that God would spare him from death. And because of his perfect devotion, his prayer or petition was answered and he was delivered." Do you ever think of Jesus going to the cross as actually being as an action of deliverance? I don't normally think of it that way, yet that was God delivering him from that situation. And you know, the one thing that it's important to note is that it wasn't the beating and it wasn't the crucifixion that Jesus was actually asking for the cup to pass, to be spared with. It was the cup of wrath for sin that the Father poured out upon him. And you have to understand, in that moment upon the cross, that God turned away from Jesus. And that's when he cried out, "Father, Father, why have you forsaken me?" He had never known separation from the Father in all his time on the earth and in all his time in creation. He'd never been separated from the Father. Yet in that moment, he was. And the agony, that was the thing that he was asking to be spared from. And then, of course, he gives his spirit up to God and dies. And that we know that, of course, his burial and his resurrection within 3 days. And in that meantime, that he actually went into hell and he took back the keys of death and Hades. And that's to speak to all the purposes on so many dimensional levels, that he was obtaining sin, but then when he paid for sin, that he went and took the keys of death and hell back from the devil himself, and that God now restored the authority that was properly placed. God created hell. So it was a violation that the devil was holding these keys to death and hell itself, that it was a violation of what God had always planned for. Yet, because of this sin coming into the world, it changed the power structure. And we see that in the book of Daniel. But it wasn't until Christ coming upon the earth, that all of that started to change. And then on the cross, that it was done once and for all. And the way for relationship was made true. It was made sound, that nothing now could get in the way of the love of God. And that his love, most importantly, made a way for each and every one of us to enter into relationship with him. That none should perish, but that all should have everlasting life. So my one and only point today is that the cross was Christ's deliverance. That it delivered him from his responsibility, his purpose, and his calling, and that it ushered him into glorification. This was the point of where Christ now became re-deified. And you would say, well, re-deified? Well, yeah, he was filled with the presence of God, but he was also in flesh. Was he God? Absolutely. But he was the deification by his resurrection that proved that he was the Son of God. That was the thing that everyone struggled with, including the disciples. We know the story of Thomas, but Thomas is not the only one that struggled with that. We know that even in his ascension into heaven, that it says that some still did not believe. Don't ask me about that. I don't know how that's possible. To walk with Jesus, to know that he lived, he died, and was resurrected, that he taught for a period of time after his death to over 500 witnesses, and then to see him ascend into heaven and still doubt. I don't know how you do that. But the reality is that it was still hard for people to grasp, but to understand that he was delivered, and he was delivered from his flesh. He was delivered from his flesh nature, just the same way you and I have to be. Until next time, be blessed.